The Council on Tuesday the 22nd of February 2022. My name is Councillor Steve Holgate and I am the Mayor. We have some members joining via Teams and members of the public are welcome to observe the proceedings on YouTube. Due to regulations surrounding voting, only those members physically present are able to vote. However, if members at home would like to contribute to the debate, please use the raise hand function on your iPad. For members of in the council chamber, if you would like to speak, please raise your hand and I will invite you to speak. When you are speaking, please speak towards the microphone so everyone can hear you. If anyone is having issues, please let Democratic Services know. And now some housekeeping. We are not expecting a fire drill, so if the alarms sound, please exit the way you came in. Please ensure that your mobile phones are switched off to silent or at silent. If the technology fails, then I will adjourn the meeting for a few minutes to try and resolve the issue, or if that is not possible, a new date and time will be organised. First of all, can we receive apologies for absence? I've got Councillor Roy Lees, Councillor Alex Hilton, and Councillor Peter Wilson. Is there anyone else?
Councillor Lynch.
Sorry?
Councillor Lynch.
Councillor Matt Lynch. Does anyone want to proffer any apologies from the floor? If not, we'll move on to declarations of interest, which is item 1. Members are reminded of their responsibility to declare any pecuniary interests in respect of matters contained in this agenda. Are any of those forthcoming? No. Item 2. Minutes of the meeting for Tuesday the 25th of January 2022 of the Council, pages 5 to 10, and that is being proposed by Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Can I propose that the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of January taken as a true and correct record?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pleasure in formally seconding.
Right, okay. Right, this item is for decision. Are there any issues to raise on the accuracy of the minutes from any member? If not, are there anybody against them? All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. Item 3 is mayoral announcements. I have 3 announcements. One is the Mayor's 007 Casino Royale Charity Ball will be held on Saturday the 26th of March. Tickets are selling fast for my 007 Casino Royale themed charity ball taking place in the Lancastrian Room in the Town Hall on Saturday the 26th of March. Sponsored by Robertson Northwest, the evening, it says swill here, maybe that's a Freudian slip. Will include entertainment from international cabaret artist Gemma Louise Doyle, fun casino featuring blackjack and roulette tables, a table magician, disco, special prize draw and an auction. Arrival is from 6:15 for a 7 o'clock start. Tickets are priced at £30, which includes champagne and a hot pot supper. I know it's an unlikely combination, but it works for me. To reserve your place, please contact the Mayor's Secretary, Paula Brindle, as soon as possible, as places are limited. If you are unable to attend, please consider a donation, as all money raised will go to my community fundraising appeal in aid of Inspire Youth Zone, St Catherine's Hospice and Chorley in Bloom. Speaking of Chorley in Bloom, my second announcement is regarding them. One of the community groups I am supporting as Mayor of Chorley is Chorley in Bloom. I have given them one of my free uses of the Lancastrian to enable them to hold an event to help raise awareness of the group's activities and the fantastic work it does in the community, and to offer advice and information on gardening and biodiversity to members of the public. The event will take place on Saturday the 19th of March from 10:30 a.m. till 4 p.m. and will include a number of speakers providing expert advice on all things gardening. There also will be a range of stalls to visit, along with some gardening demonstrations. Entry will be free of charge, which is very cheap indeed, and there is no need to book in advance. Finally, I'd just like to mention a visit I made as Mayor to the Commercial Museum in Leyland a couple of weeks ago, at which awards were given to young people and young apprentices on the apprenticeship scheme run by I think Runshaw College on behalf of the council. It was a fantastic event, some very proud young people there gaining fantastic experience and job satisfaction and giving them a real bumper start to a career in whatever they choose to endure, whatever. So anyway, it was a fantastic recognition of the work that not only the apprentices had put in, but all those people who were running the apprenticeship courses. So with that, that's my mayoral announcements done, except to say you may find a sheet of paper in front of you relating to the Mayor's Charity Ball. So please fill that in to ensure you don't miss out. I know some of you have already straight out to the blocks and already bid for their tickets. Right, item 4 is public questions. There's a question has been received from Mr. Hunter Rossell, who is attending via Teams, I believe. Just to be clear on procedure, Mr. Hunter Rossell, you may speak for up to 3 minutes to explain the context for your question. Following the answer, you may also ask one supplementary question. Is Mr. Hunter Rossell with us?
He is.
Yeah, I'm here. I don't know if you can hear me all right. Hello.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I wasn't actually aware that I could speak around it. I thought I was literally just going to be reading it out, but I will just clarify that that quote where it says the proposed cycling task group stalled due to lack of response from members, that was from the reports back for the last council meeting. That's where I got that quote from. So yeah, I will just put the question if that's all right. I was disappointed to read that the proposed cycling task group stalled due to a lack of response, a lack of interest from members for setting up that group. According to ONS data for 2019-20, about 14% of adults in Chorley cycle at least once per week, with many more cycling less frequently. And I will also add to that, I certainly know of many people who would cycle more if there was better cycling infrastructure and if it felt safer to cycle and there were more places to lock up bikes, etc. So, you know, there's plenty of interest out there. I would hope that even if members are not cyclists themselves, they would be keen to represent the interests of that significant portion of Chorley residents. And given the positive impact on our health, our environment, and on reducing traffic, and given that Active Travel England will soon be grading authorities on their performance on active travel, I'm hoping the council will be willing to commit to attempt that cycling task group. Oh, I've put 2 questions. Did you want me to sort of put them both at once and then you respond to them both, or are we taking them one at a time?
Respondents.
Sorry, microphone wasn't on there.
Sorry?
The mic wasn't on, one at a time.
One at a time, yeah. Councillor Bradley.
Okay, sure.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And if it's okay with you, because Mr. Hunter Rossall or as Andy, because we become friends through COVID, Andy, I think. You've been on a few times now. So if it's okay, I'll do the sat down if that's okay, because I'm going to read my answer a little bit, so it'll probably be clearer on the microphone, Mr. Mayor, if I can do it from the sedentary Jacob Rees-Mogg position, if that's okay with you. Yeah, I'll try and stay upright slightly. Okay, as Andy's probably aware, members of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee can choose to undertake whatever tasks they wish, and I'm aware there were a number of competing priorities requiring focus recently from that grouping, including, amongst others, the select move housing, school places, wider planning concerns, which are a big issue at the moment in our borough, all of which are of significant interest to many residents and to councillors who would be on that committee. And despite the fact that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee decided not to proceed at that time with the current proposal on that cycling task group, other avenues, Mr Mayor, are being pursued within the Council to begin work with the support of both officers and members to meet and achieve targets in place and that are set for 2030 to overcome and at times perceived negativity and prejudice, unfortunately, towards cycling that can be encountered in the borough. Of course, Mr Mayor, Lancashire County Council is ultimately responsible for transport infrastructure, including cycling, within Chorley area, and we are having conversations and plans are underway with them to improve, incentivise and promote cycling across our borough. We are also constantly looking to obtain views from residents relating to cycling across all age ranges and demographics to support the work that the county and ourselves are doing, communication with residents and partners to actively increase cycling awareness, cycle safety and all kinds of cycling related activities are already underway, and we will of course continue to provide updates on completed work to council members and to residents as well. Further exploration into transport and cycling policy proposals are also underway as part of our strategic plan that's going on at the moment with South Ribble and Preston, and that is more than just the usual adding paint to roads or making token efforts as happens elsewhere. This is about cycling being interwoven into all our various planning policies, but not limited to the green agenda, air quality, health, infrastructure, planning and development, but everything we do. Now, I understand that the next monitoring report for the Overview and Scrutiny Task Group's Sustainable Public Transport will be presented back to the meeting on the 17th of March 2022. The Overview and Scrutiny Committee will have no doubt highlight how work related to cycling will be packaged and transferred to other working groups, Mr Mayor, such as the Climate Change Working Group that you yourself are on. And following the completion of the current decided work programme, a report on cycling will also be returned to the committee at some point in the future for them to consider what they would wish to undertake in the future. I think that all demonstrates that the council is doing many things on cycling. I'm sure it's not enough for many members and for many residents. And you'll also be aware, Andy, that the chairing of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee at Chorley is commonly passed to an opposition member to ensure we are properly scrutinised as an administration. And at the moment, that is Councillor John Walker. And I'm happy for John to add any other comments that he would wish to add in addition to those I've made.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Bradley. Happen to stand up and you covered the workings of the Overview and Scrutiny in the municipal area very well. I couldn't have done better. So thank you for that. And I'd like to invite Mr Hunter to appear at the scrutiny meeting when the report comes from the advisory group about cycling. Thank you.
Question, or are you happy with that response?
Yeah, no, thanks for those responses. Happy to attend any scrutiny committee meetings. Was that the 17th of March, you said, or was that a different one? Sorry, there was a few meeting dates thrown out there.
We'll advise you, but I believe it is the 7th. I'll advise you, but it will be the 17th of March, I believe.
Right, thanks. Yeah, only sort of follow-up question. I think right at the start of your answer there, Alistair, after you compared yourself to Jacob Rees-Mogg, I wouldn't dream of doing that. You mentioned some targets for 2030. I'd appreciate if you could send those over when I presume I get a written response as well, or I presume there will be a written copy of that response. If you could send over what the targets are or a link to those, that'd be appreciated.
Can do, Mr Mayor, by you.
Having dealt with that question, do you want to put your second question?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. After the closure of the bingo hall in Chorley Town Centre, I was disappointed that the council could see nothing better to do with the site than yet another car park. It's been quite a few new car parks in the last few years, and not to mention the aborted attempt to add extra space to the Queen's Road car park as well. It feels like we're losing a lot of green space to new houses, and then we're putting a lot of car parks in the town centre. So what this question is asking, I'll summarise it, is whether it is being considered, whether it can be considered that sites in the town centre, particularly buildings, can be considered as for conversion to housing, rather than building all our housing several miles from the town centre and then building car parks for people to commute in. There's a lot of cities, a lot of towns around the world that are now adopting the idea of some could say 15-minute neighborhoods, some say 20-minute neighborhoods, but the idea is that you build your houses where the amenities are, and cut out and design out, plan out the need for cars. So the idea of 15-minute neighborhoods and 20-minute neighborhoods, for those who aren't aware, is that everywhere, everything you need on a sort of daily basis. So that's work opportunities, access to public transport, access to schools and shops, should be planned to be within a 15-minute active travel of where you live. So houses should be within a 15-minute walk or cycle of schools and shops, etc. I think there's plenty of opportunities for this in Chorley. There are plenty of quite a few empty buildings. I don't mean the shops right in the town centre, but abandoned pubs, etc. Pubs that haven't been open for quite some time. There was this bingo hall. Having people living in the town centre revitalises the town centre.
Can you round up, Andy, please? Just getting close.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. I think the council recognises the need to reduce car use, certainly through its climate strategy that is mentioned, and this is a great way of doing it. So I'd like it to be considered that we build housing in the town centre in future. Consider opportunities like this bingo hall for housing.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yeah, there's a number of complex issues there, Andy, but I'll try and do my best to answer most of the ones you've picked up. So the car park in place opposite the town hall on the old bingo hall site is a temporary measure looking to best utilise a brownfield site for town centre businesses while the full redevelopment scheme is progressed, hopefully at a later date, through the government's Levelling Up fund, for which Chorley disappointingly has been classified as a Category 2 town and therefore can't get any funding at the moment from it, despite our applying for at least 2 lots, if not 3 lots of money so far. A previous Future High Street Fund bid to develop the site was also unsuccessful, partly due to the presence of that bingo hall being a risk to progress because they want these shovel-ready sites. And therefore, when the opportunity arose through the impacts of COVID on the bingo industry, unfortunately, the council took the decision to ready the site for the next round of funding available, whenever that may be, and thereby de-risk delivery. That precludes us putting anything permanent on the site if it's planning to be redeveloped. So no decision has yet been made on the definitive future use of that site, but Chorley residents will be consulted on future proposals, and those proposals are very likely, because of all the master planning we've done previously, to include some public open space and some additional environmental improvements to the town centre. They are being built into whatever we do. But it has to be borne in mind that in recent years, the demise of bus services, being supported by, in particular, the Conservative government and LCC, has meant that many of Chorley's rural residents have no choice but to use their cars to get to the town centre, both to do their shopping, to support local businesses and use the market that's obviously a main feature of our town. And without the capacity to cater for these vehicles at times when people want to come into the town centre, and the lack of parking will lead to more online shopping, which generates vehicle movements, as you're well aware, and it will have a detrimental on our overall town centre viability as well. And it could be argued that it's far more environmentally preferable for local residents to travel at low speeds on short journeys into Chorley town centre than to travel at high speed on the motorway network to Liverpool and Manchester. So we are in a bit of a balance of evils here. So it's not a perfect world, trust me. We also experience significant congestion on existing town centre car parks due to the absence, I believe, of a coherent national and sub-regional transport policy that we've longed to see campaign to see improved, both in our area and across Lancashire, and it needs to be far more far-sighted. As a result of that policy, I believe, it is not uncommon for residents to cruise around our town centre looking for vacant short-stay car parking spaces. This damages the environment, it damages our residents' health, and this temporary car park will help alleviate some of that behaviour. Chorley does indeed have a proud record of increasing residential numbers in our town centre, and our successful town centre policy is not only based upon this shift, but also supports the high-density housing that often results from that development of town centre sites. But unfortunately, as we see time and again, the national government, and in particular Michael Gove recently, are failing to support Chorley's aspirations to have lower numbers of new houses being built on green fields. And as I recently stated in the Chorley Guardian, which I hope you read, Andy, the only levelling up that Chorley is experiencing at the moment is the levelling off of our green fields for yet more executive housing that we either need nor want. I think that is particularly regrettable at this time, and I take on board a lot of the points you make, and we will try to build them in, but the world is not perfect and we can only do what we do. But points noted. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Bradley. Andy, do you want to come back with a second question?
No, one supplemental.
Not so much a question, I'll just a comment on one of those points, the point around building more car parks, alleviating congestion. There is a concept of induced traffic where if you build more roads or if you build more car parking, more people drive on journeys that they might have taken by other means of transport. So any such alleviation is always temporary, and it just leads to more people getting in their cars and parking in the town centre. But yes, your quotes in the paper are noted, and yeah, we'd certainly share views on the levelling of our green spaces. So thanks for that.
Respond.
Noted, Mr. Mayor. Noted.
Right, noted. Thank you. Thank you, Andy. You're most welcome to continue listening to the rest of the meeting if you've nothing better to do, or if you want to leave, you're most welcome to do that. Thank you. Okay, right. Can we move on to item 5, which is entitled Reopening of Astley Hall, pages 13 to 20 on your agenda. Councillor Bradley, you want to present this item? Yeah, I moved that swiftly on there. You weren't ready.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, because unfortunately you'll notice that Councillor Wilson is on the screen, not next to me, and this is an item he would have been doing, like many of the others tonight, so I am going to be very busy with lots of paper shuffling, Mr. Mayor, so get used to it, in my view. Right, the report that you've got, members have got, is obviously fairly straightforward. It outlines the recommendations we want to take, and it explains in paragraphs 13 through to 17 the fact that we have made extensive renovation work through the pandemic to Astley Hall, and I think many people will be very happy with how it looks, that it's all gone generally smoothly. I can't quite believe it's on budget, as Mr. Andrew Daniels keeps telling me, but it appears to be. There's been work done to the museums area and the shops area, and that significant work has changed the context of Astley Hall. We have regularly reviewed over the last few years about different charging structures for Astley Hall, because it has been, as it's demonstrated in paragraph 21, a lot cheaper to visit than other similar venues. But what we didn't want to do was to charge just for the sake of charging. What we wanted to do was come up with a proportionate scheme that both helped to pay for some of the cost of running Astley Hall and an expanded Astley Hall in the future, and also helped enable us to keep the levels of exhibitions, the level of investment going in the future. So it documents, Mr. Mayor, the report documents through paragraphs 23 to 30 the different charging structures which are aimed at being cheap for Chorley residents, particularly families, and the idea that if you pay for a ticket as a family or as an individual, if you're a Chorley resident, you can have multiple visits in the year. You get charged slightly more if you're from outside of Chorley to come and see the delights of Astley Hall and to encourage a visitor economy. There is another significant change in the charging for weddings, Mr. Mayor, which again is to be reflective of the market for that kind of usage, and the fact that before COVID it was increasingly popular for weddings, which will be separated from the other visitors to avoid that conflict that did occur previously. Again, Mr. Mayor, I think the proposals are balanced. Members in my own group reflected the need for time credits to be utilised to attend the hall as well, and therefore people can get benefit of kind, which we are happy to do. Also, the fact that through the next few months we will trial certain charging structures, we will trial discounts and initiatives and incentives, and we'll see what works. And we will revisit this at some point, I'm sure, in the next year or two. So the recommendations, Mr. Mayor, that are detailed in paragraphs 2 to 5 are to introduce the admission fee for entry, as set out in the report, to agree that concessionary rate for Chorley residents, as we all know are the the salt of the earth, Mr Mayor. To note the increased opening hours to the hall and to provide more opportunities for people to visit and to approve the other related fees and charges around weddings, etc., detailed in Appendix A. Happy to take questions, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Lowe, do you want to second the proposal?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to formally second, but just a couple of comments. Bring members' attention to paragraph 21 of the report and the comparable how the proposed charges are comparable to neighbouring authorities. The purpose of the report, as Councillor Bradley has said, is to support the long-term sustainability of such a vital asset, often known as the jewel in Chorley's crown. Looking forward to the reopening at the end of April. It's to do with the considerable recognition of the considerable investment that this authority has put forward, and just to again mention paragraph 22 of the report, the proposed charge of an annual pass of £5 for local residents. I formally second, Mr Mayor.
Open this discussion up now. For anyone wish to comment? Councillor Riggott.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I read this report with interest, and I certainly agree with their leader's view that we should be moving to encourage more people to attend, making the most of it, and saying it's a jewel in Chorley's crown. But I actually think, therefore, putting charges on for admission goes against that. I think, as it outlines, in the increasing of opening hours, it's to provide more opportunities for people to visit. So I'm very uncomfortable with the idea of saying we'd spend £1 million of, not our money, of the taxpayers' money, to renovate and bring the hall back to the wonderful position it's in, and then we have to charge them to come in. And if we're trying to grow a visitor economy, I'm not sure how that looks to the people outside of Chorley, saying, well, you know, I would think we'd grow our economy stronger by saying it's a free destination, asking them to come. They might spend more when they're here. We might get more visitors, and that knock-on ripple effect might generate more bookings for weddings, more of the use for the space, rather than I'm quite concerned we put that barrier up, and immediately a number of people in the borough might say, I'd love to go in Ashley Hall, I'd love to go with the kids, but suddenly it's £15. I don't know whether I can quite afford that. So I'm really happy with the recommendations of charging more for weddings, making the most of the asset, showing how great it looks, increasing the opening hours so it's fully accessible as much as possible. I've got no problems with any of those, but I would really urge Council to withdraw the recommendations for admission fees for residents and reflect on the success that many museums and cultural settings do, where they don't charge you to go in, but they have points where you can drop a £5 in, or they have a place where you just scan with your phone and you make a donation. You see them in religious settings, in all sorts of cultural museum sessions, and people go in, have a great experience and come out, but you know, that was free, you know what, I'll do it, and it's a much better experience than putting that barrier up and asking people not to come in the first place. So if you want me to move a formal amendment, I can do, but if you want to, it's up to you whether you want to consider that first, Alistair.
I'm happy to ask the question. So are you proposing no charge or a level of charging?
So, Mr Mayor, no charge for general admission. Happy to charge for weddings and all other functions.
Mr Mayor, on the grounds of it's not viable to maintain the ongoing maintenance of the hall in the future on that basis, and the numbers contained in the report are fairly conservative, let's use that phrase, fairly low level. But also, Mr Mayor, I'm a bit surprised that the members opposite are saying this, because the biggest feedback we've ever had on the Ashley Hall is people coming, saying to us, oh, I was surprised it was so nice, a surprised we're actually not charging for it, and like you said, happy to put money in, but they don't. So they're happy to pay for it, but like most things that you're voluntary, they don't actually then go and put the money in the tub. They don't go and swipe the cards. What they prefer is to be able to go and just say, right, that's a bit of money for it. I think it's a small amount. It's less than most of the similar attractions elsewhere. It's fully worth the money in my own view, Mr Mayor, which is hence the proposal. But if the members opposite are happy to subsidise the visiting of Chorley by people from outside Chorley for the next 20 years, fine, we'll have a vote on it, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Boardman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just to follow up on what Councillor Bigot was saying. I think misinterpreted what he was actually saying. He was saying, yes, it's free to enter, but there is a voluntary contribution. If anybody's been down to London or any of the cities, Manchester, Liverpool, they'll know that all the museum and galleries there that are free to enter have voluntary collection boxes at the door. They also have incentives to actually pay, which are printed brochures, which may cost 50p to print. However, they're sold for a £5. You'll see that they do very, very well when you look at the figures, because people are prepared to voluntarily contribute as opposed to be forced to pay for it. So when people are through the door, they will pay for something. So if Councillor Riggett wants to propose that, I will formally second it. Second question I've got for you, Alistair. Yes, fully agree with your wedding charges. I actually think they're a little bit low in comparison to other venues. But I'd also think that you are missing a little bit of a trick. We've got one of the biggest areas, Astley Park, around the hall, and we're restricting our wedding offer to the hall itself. I think the council should look into a marquee offer, because lots of people love getting married in marquees over the summertime. Me, one of them, a long time ago, can't remember now, but it was at Rufford Old Hall. It was so very successful. We paid a significant amount of money to Rufford Old Hall, quite a bit more than what you've got in these proposals, and that was a long time ago. So I'd really like the council to look into a marquee venue associated with the hall.
Let's just get some clarification. Let's get some clarification from Councillor Riggett. Is what Councillor Boardman's saying her interpretation of what you're saying? Because that doesn't seem quite the same to me.
If it's clear, Mr. Mayor, there's 4 recommendations, and we would like to amend it to only approve recommendations 3 and 4, because recommendations 2 and 3, as they're listed by the points, are the ones for charges for residents. If I've read that, interpreted that correctly, guys. Thank you.
Councillor Bradley.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I was chatting away then with my colleagues. Could you just repeat that last comment, Councillor Riggett?
The last comment was, am I correct? So Gary, I think I'll go back a little bit before that, because, you know,
Left up there, didn't he?
there's 4 recommendations. We would like to remove recommendations, the first 2, which are points 2 and 3, which we're gauging to the charges for residents, and just keep the last 2, which are points 4 and 5.
No, Mr. Mayor. No,
we need to vote.
we could put a vote on it,
Right.
but ultimately, and I've consulted my colleagues as you were talking, we believe that the amounts that recovered through voluntary contributions is less than £5,000 in the last year. Now, obviously, not the last year, because that's been COVID affected. The year before COVID, it was minimal, and most of those we got on events evenings as opposed to people actually giving money. You need a pay structure. Most places now have a pay structure, and therefore, in our view, that's what needs to happen in this place.
Okay. So my understand. Sorry.
Is that what's seconded by Councillor? Yes.
And is that what's seconded by Councillor Boardman? Yes.
I will second that.
Okay. Thank you. My understanding is that because there's been an amendment, we need to vote on the amendment first. So could we indicate all those in favour of the amendment, please show. Okay. So we now move on to the substantive proposal, which was proposed and seconded by Councillor Bradley and Councillor Lowe. All those in favour? All those against? Any abstentions?
It's carried.
Right, that's carried. Moving on to item 6, which is the Fair Collection Charter. This item is for decision and is to be presented by Councillor Adrian Lowe, seconded by Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm delighted to present this report, which is to propose that a fair collection charter is adopted and to highlight the measures already adopted to help financially vulnerable customers and local businesses. If members turn to paragraph 13 of the report, which states that local authorities are under significant financial pressure and we do have a duty to collect as much as possible from both our residents and local businesses, bring members' attention to the fact that the current debt management policies here in Chorley have not been revised since 2015, and in South Ribble it's 2018. From paragraphs 19 onwards, it highlights some of the measures already undertaken by this authority to help the most vulnerable within our society, and that is right and proper to, from an ethical point of view, is to give the support where necessary through whatever measures, whether it's the council tax support scheme or various other measures. And so with those comments, Mr Mayor, I'm happy to move the recommendations that we adopt the Charter, and that delegate to myself as the executive member for any cost-neutral changes. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to echo some of the comments that Councillor Lowe's made, while we do have a duty to collect debts, it has been a direction of travel for a number of years that we use less rigorous and less enforcement to collect small amounts of money, which are better collected by helping people to pay those amounts rather than threatening them if they don't pay those amounts. So I'm more than happy to second these proposals, Mr Mayor.
Okay, right. So we're now debating this item. Does anyone wish to speak? Councillor Boardman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just one comment. Yeah, I fully support the majority of the documentation. Paragraph 26, page 24, it just makes reference to the breathing space initiative by the government. Government brought this in to be fair to people that are in serious debt and to give them a little bit of time to sort this serious debt out. I do note in paragraph 28 that it says it's an executive member decision for resources. Councillor Lowe, I really do hope that you'll opt for this good strategy which the government put forward to relieve the pressure.
Thanks, Mr Mayor, and I've not yet been promoted. The executive member for resources is Councillor Wilson, and I believe that he will be seriously looking at taking that executive member decision to incorporate into our debt management policy.
Okay, thank you. This item is for decision, and therefore we need to indicate whether we agree or disagree. All those in favour? NEMCOM. Okay, are we okay with that? Right. Moving on, item 7. Future development of shared services. On your agenda items, pages 33 to 60, to be introduced by Councillor Bradley and to be seconded by Councillor Morwood.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. And this, I will hopefully distill 2 meetings of the Shared Services Committee that we had to discuss this. We had 1 originally, but we ended up with 2 because it has gone through a level of scrutiny at that meeting where all groups here and at South Ribble were involved. Members will be aware, obviously, been issuing shared services now for a couple of years with South Ribble. Almost 47-48% now of staff are in the shared services arrangement, and therefore, Mr Mayor, there has been an opportunity for a period of reflection. The first tranche, if you like, plus a bit extra of shared services has been delivered, and it has generally worked out, Mr Mayor. You can see the report details the savings made to the 2 councils. It details some of the joint delivery items that we've done, some of the joint improvements in service, and, Mr Mayor, some of the concerns about services as well, because it's not all gone swimmingly. It's had its good bits and its bad bits, like most things that are new. What it has done, though, Mr Mayor, is made us ask for a number of questions, which are particularly documented in the tables from paragraph 21 onwards around options moving forward. So there are a number of options you'd expect. Number 1 is to stop sharing services altogether. Having gone as far as we have, there is an exit plan. I did ask the question myself, Mr Mayor. We have an exit plan. We can give a year's notice to either each council, give a year's notice, and we can pack the whole thing in if we don't like it. So that is still an option. but it wasn't one that members of the shared services wanted to particularly progress. We could pause further expansion and have a bit of a standstill period. Again, risks with that in that we have an increasing amount of number of people who, if you like, are expecting to go into a shared service arrangement, particularly staff and departments, who perhaps feel a bit left out that their department hasn't moved forward. And it was raised at the Shared Services Committee that a number of the terms and conditions now are unbalanced within the councils, and we are looking to rectify that as soon as possible. Another option would be to identify further areas for sharing, and also as part of that, 2 additional points would be to be a little bit opportunistic. So we might have plans to do certain services that, if you like, are identified as being ripe for doing shared work, but also as things come along, and one of the final recommendations in this report is around a shared pest control service, which is not very much an opportunistic chance to share service and improve, hopefully, the services that certainly we provide here in Chorley. As part of that, Mr Mayor, it was highlighted by officers and agreed by members that we also look to both continue to develop shared services wider by looking at those services most suited to it, by looking to be opportunistic where circumstances arise, but also to review and strengthen existing management arrangements. Because to do a shared arrangement at a time of COVID has put significant strain on our management capacity. It's put significant strain on our staff and probably our members as well, because to do the both together has been very difficult. And we need to work out, Mr Mayor, whether it's the impact of COVID alone, if it's the impact of shared services alone, or it's a combination of the both, which is probably, my own view, is probably what it is. So there's a proposal to both strengthen and review the actual operation of some of the shared directorates, but also to bring in a couple of additional posts. One, to look, if you like, externally, because we are doing a lot of project work, Mr Mayor, both in Chorley historically, which is still ongoing. South Ribble has been watching what we've been doing and has also got an appetite for project work. So there is a proposal to do some of that by appointing an officer, a senior officer, to lead on that. And also to bring in a post of Director of Change and Delivery, which will look to support some of the change work that's going on within the shared service arrangement and in future shared service arrangements to, if you like, pick up some of those perhaps strains that are being experienced by some of the individual departments going through that. I think, Mr Mayor, that's a balanced proposal. It's a balanced view to move forward. The actual recommendations are detailed in paragraphs 2 through to 8. The fact that we want to keep moving at some kind of speed was considered by the Shared Services Committee and ended up as having the second meeting to put the additional posts and the additional structural changes, which will come in due course as part of shared services, into this report to get things going. And with relation to the final item around the sharing of that pest control role, the benefit of doing that, which is detailed, I think, in paragraph 9 on page 59, the benefit of doing that is where we've previously relied on external contractors, we will be utilising an in-house resource from South Ribble that's beefed up to deal with both councils. And to me, Mr Mayor, that is the exact way we should be approaching shared services in the future and capitalising on what each of us does well for the benefit of both. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm happy to second this report and just a couple of points. This side, and I'm sure the members opposite who have been to these meetings, I've every confidence in our officers and what they've done, and the success over the last couple of years has been really quite amazing, I think. Not to say, and I know that these sort of views were expressed at South Ribble, that we were all happy and we were just letting things go on this council. There's been a lot of debate, a lot of discussion, sometimes a lot of argument on certainly our group side. But as over the last 2 years, things have progressed very much. So we've become more confident in what has been going on, and we're really happy for this to progress further. And as I say, every confidence in the officers, they give us the right recommendations. And I don't think we can really underestimate the pressures that the directors had when we were going through this initial 2 years of work, and that is why it's been recognised that we need these extra directors and strategic leads to focus now on moving on. Thank you. As I say, happy
Thank you,
to
Councillor Morwood. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think we've been doing a good job on shared services, and I think those members that sit from the different parties on the Shared Services Joint Committee have also been doing a good job in working together, and I think we've been supportive. And so it is said with genuine honesty and feeling that I do wish that the proposals with regard to the posts were separate from the rest of the update, because I feel we might feel differently about it. I do wonder if, with my experience of local government as an officer, having seen a number of instances where a new chief executive has come in and quite properly within their remit reshape the organisation in order to deliver things in the way that reflects their understanding of the best way of taking the organisation forward. I do wonder if now is the best time to recruit to these extra posts and substantially change the senior structure of the council, or whether it would be more appropriate, given the item we have later on the agenda, to deal with that first and then revisit that when we know who we are talking about.
Thank you, Councillor Chairman. I'm not willing to change the agenda format, but thank you. Councillor Boardman.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like Councillor Chapman, I'm very much in support of shared service. Having sat on the committee for a number of years, I do miss it actually this year. Would you believe? But yeah, I'm wholly supportive of the directors that run the shared services business and the models, and the fact that the committee sit and they do seem to all get on very well. There is, however, my reservation, the same as Councillor Chapman, with regards to the timing of the two posts that looking to recruit. There is a statement on page 37, agenda item 7, under the pause further expansion, and I do like this statement, so I'm going to read it out. The advantage of this is that it would allow the council to adjust to the new shared arrangements without further change. It would provide an opportunity to monitor the ongoing performance of the shared services. I, like Councillor Chapman, think it's probably important to really monitor the shared service and see where we're going with it over even a short period of time up until December, until we look at recruiting a chief executive officer. I too would like to see the split, unfortunately, Mr. Mayor. So I am going to make an amendment and put that forward. Hopefully it'll be seconded, that we do split out the vote of tonight, because we don't want to seem to be non-supported of shared services, that items 4, 5 and 6 are taken separately on a vote, and items 2, 3, 7 and 8 are taken separately. I do like to say that I know full well that there has been some disgruntlement in South Ribble. They believe that it's a Chorley Borough Council takeover of their council. I know that's been quashed quite a bit over the past few weeks, but I just would like to say I wouldn't like to see the recruitment of these two officers and directorships as a levelling up arrangement. And it'd be interesting to see who gets put forward for them. Councillor Bradley, you're smirking, but I think you know what I'm talking about. So I'd just like to have some assurances on that, but I will move to make that amendment. Thank you.
Before I bring Councillor Bradley back, we need a seconder. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to second Councillor Boardman's proposal to split the items apart to 2, 3, 7 and 8 and 4, 5 and 6, so they're taken separately. Thank you.
Councillor Bradley.
I wasn't smirking, Mr. Mayor. I was just admiring the fact that Councillor Boardman misses shared services and still regrets how much he paid for his wedding marquee. So, no. Everything's online these days if you know where to look for it. Right, and on that basis, let's cut to the chase here. We put through the first proposals that you're trying to now separate at the first meeting of the shared services effectively, and had agreement on that. At which point we then discussed about next steps and timescales about reinforcing that structure and some of that work. And the chief exec and deputy chief exec, I think at that point, I think were surprised many of us at that meeting by saying, well, it would be actually the best to get on with it right now, because we were going in from now a shared services discussion and council meetings into an election period, new administration, etc., change arounds and all the rest of it, and into the chief executive renewal thing. I appreciate the points made opposite, but when our chief exec and our deputy chief exec sit there and go, this is the right thing to do, I can't ignore that, because we could be 6 months further down the line and still have some of these issues ongoing, which I would think would cost us far more, Councillor Chapman, than waiting and doing something later, because the risk is far greater. And the members opposite are usually first to spot risks in things. They're very good at it. And therefore, this time, I'm swayed towards, and I've swayed my group towards, supporting the senior officers in this proposal. Because, and I said this to the shared services, I think part 2, was that some of the concerns that we've raised around capacity and what have you, particularly on those 2 roles, they're dealing with external projects, which there is a lot to do in quite a short space of time. And as you'll be aware, these are quite time restricted. They have to be delivered by certain dates to get external money in. And then the second part, the internal transformational work, which is required in some areas of the councils, is important. And therefore, I'm happy to, ideally, I'd follow the route that you guys are suggesting. But I think at the moment, we need to get on with it because the risk is greater of not doing it now. I will be proven right or wrong, but at the moment, that's where we're stopping to. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So that is not...
Let's take the amendment.
Yeah, that is not accepted, so we take the amendment. Have we finished debating on the amendment? So we'll move to a vote on the amendment. Those in favour of the amendment, please show. Those against? That's clearly lost. Therefore, we now move on to the recommendation as is on page 33. Can we have an indication of those in favour of that recommendation?
So, can we just be clear, Mr.
Sorry.
Mayor? The vote is on all the recommendations.
The vote is on the whole of the recommendation,
Paragraphs
including
2 to 8.
including 2, 3, 7 and 8, which was proposed to be separated. So it's all of them.
Yeah.
Please show those in favour. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Okay, that's clearly... Yes, Councillor Bradley.
Can I just say, Mr. Brown, I appreciate we have a vote, which is unusual in the shared services arrangements, but I do appreciate that surely councillors generally keep a unified front in the shared services meetings. That is appreciated. I would hate for this to go against that. This is a decision for Chorley Council to make. It doesn't reflect our position on shared services. It's what the administration here thinks is important, but your support on many things over the last few months has been appreciated.
That's appreciated and understood. Moving on to item 8, recruitment of a chief executive, pages 61 to 64, and to follow pages 193 to 196. This is to be presented by Councillor Bradley and seconded by Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Following on from the last non-contentious item of this, I'm not even going to look at you because I can't help seeing it in peripheral vision, the chief executive. Right, okay, no. He's been a control freak thus far. I suspect he won't not be now. Right, Mr. Mayor, yes, we have a difficult period coming up, difficult decisions to make. We have had a chief executive in place for a long time, and he's been, I'm not going to say nice things, I'll do that later on. He's been competent enough to have been recommended to South Ribble when they had problems. Let's just leave it at that. I can't be any nicer than that, can I? No, but all good things have to come to an end, and yeah, and Gary's leaving. So we need to think about replacing our chief executive. And to be honest, I personally, Councillor Wilson and others have been badgering to get a plan in place, probably for a few months now. And because we need a succession plan, we need a handover. It's going to be very hard for somebody who's been embedded in this organisation for more than 10 years, 15 years, however long now at senior level, to hand all those roles on and those roles over. And therefore, we need that plan to be put in place. We need it to be done in a constructive, mature, sensible manner, particularly for Chorley. It is a joint role, so we have to do that with South Ribble, and we need to get the right person for Chorley moving forward. And there is a strategy laid out in the papers about how we would go about doing that, which is in common with many other senior appointments that many of us have been through over the recent years. But like many organisations, when you're changing the person at the top, it's the most dangerous time for an organisation, so we have to do it right. We have to think about who is going to be on the nominations committee come May, no matter who's in control of this council, and we need to think about how we go about getting the best person to do the job. The process is laid out there. It's fairly well-trodden path for those who've been through it before. Happy to see it improved if we can, but I think it's a process that has served us reasonably well in the past in terms of recruiting and allows everybody to have their say. And therefore, the times for saying nice things about Gary will come towards the end of the year. Now it's more important we identify the person to replace our Chief Exec in the best possible manner, and I hope all members will be as involved as they possibly can. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Councillor Lowe.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Happy to second the recommendation. Just a couple of quick comments. There is no deviation from the current policy, which is to advertise the post internally. If that's not successful, then the next process, as the report says, would go through an external recruitment process. And just I'm reassured, Mr Mayor, that the whole process will be supported by North West regional employers. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Does anyone wish to comment or discuss this matter? If not, we will move straight to a vote. This is an item for decision, so please indicate if you're in favour of the recommendation. All those in favour? Anyone against? Unanimous.
Well, I thought at some point somebody'd say don't leave, but nobody said that, so... right through the horn.
I'm sure it was just an oversight. Just to be sure, an amendment. We're moving on now to item 9, which is the budget papers. This item will be presented by Councillor Bradley in the absence of Councillor Wilson, who we wish well, along with a number of other of our councillors who are a bit poorly at the moment. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and I felt under pressure on that last report. I'm even more under pressure on this one, so we'll see how we get on. So yes, I am not Peter Wilson. This is the first budget I've had to do in all these years, but please bear with me. I will do what he does when he starts. I'll thank all the staff for their assistance and preparation and everything. I will obviously preen myself and get ready to tell you all how well I'm doing, as Peter would, but no. It's about taking the same approach, but a different style. It is very much the same approach. We have managed in Chorley over a number of years now, I believe, to run a prudent and balanced budget. We will maintain doing that, and Peter has been instrumental in that, and therefore I normally sit back at this part of the meeting and just watch and listen and chip in anything I need to do. But I am not tonight, because there are some important decisions to be made by this council, both for this year and for the next few years, because whilst we are coming, hopefully, touch wood, to the end of the COVID times, we are still in very uncertain times for local government. We are seeing issues around a short-term approach to local government finance that hasn't just lasted for 10 years, it's lasted for more like 15 years since the banking crash of the mid-2000s. We seem to have lurched from crisis to crisis to crisis, and therefore the government's settlement of monies on local government is at best short-term and at worst is disorganised and chaotic. So we do not know now what some large proportion of our money we will have at this time next year, okay? Because the government won't give you that certainty. Every year it ends up balancing up, but every year it's done differently and we cannot be certain of it. So our finance team have to do the best they can to decipher what's likely to happen in the next 2-3 years. That is no way, Mr Mayor, to run an organisation. That is no way to run a country, in my view. And according to, I think it's Neil O'Brien, might have got his wrong first name, but Minister O'Brien, who was on the District Networks call yesterday, he even agreed it's no way to run anything because it leads to inefficiencies. It leads to short-term decisions being made that aren't to the benefit of residents and to the benefit of this council. But that's the game we're in. That's the game we're playing. So within that, we have to look at the information that the officers have provided to us, which is detailed and is got all the relevant facts in there, and work out how we are going to get Chorley through the next year and the next few years. Set against an environment where one of our near neighbours, Pendle, this week posted £3 million budget deficit with no real idea of how to get through it. Set against a government white paper that came out around levelling up and around local government and devolution funding that appears to be recycling a lot of the same money again. And again, I had a Conservative leader on the phone to me today saying how little it was and therefore it wasn't enough for them. And what we need to do is be structured, sensible and be secure in how we plan Chorley's finances for the next 3 years as part of the medium-term financial strategy that it appears that we have to put in place in the backdrop of the government not having that in place themselves. I also, earlier on, Mr Mayor, circulated a paper at late notice. I apologise to members for doing it, but it showed a comparison of the council tax rates in Lancashire. It was in something that looked a bit like that. And it showed who was putting their rates up, council tax rates up this year, and by what percentage. The only council in Lancashire not putting its council tax rates up is South Ribble, because they got a settlement last week, so not last month or Christmas when the rest of us got it. They got an adjustment last week that gave them another 600,000. Lucky them. We didn't get anything. But what it shows is that even with the rises that are going through here, Chorley is the second lowest council tax raising authority in Lancashire, second only to the Ribble Valley. And I don't think many, even our opposition sat opposite, would argue that the second least effective or second least delivering council in Lancashire. We're probably the highest delivering council in Lancashire, but yet our rates are lower than most. So we present, Mr Mayor, value for money to council taxpayers, we believe. But we can't keep cutting our base. We can't keep failing to ask residents for money. 6 years out of the last 9, we've done a freeze on council tax because we only put council tax up when we really have to. This year, we're looking to push it up by 1.99%. And the fundamental reason, as Councillor Wilson has probably told you in previous years, Mr Mayor, and I will repeat, is that if we don't put that money up, the government's reverse mechanism, when they come to do fair deal funding or look at what we can raise ourselves in future years, will be cut by that amount of money. So they will take the money off us anyway. We've seen the messing around with new homes bonus that's been done, the reductions and all the rest of it that we've seen, and that's detailed in paragraph 26. Members can see from paragraph 31 where the council's money comes from, its core budget money comes from, and can see the reduction over coming years on what we raise from the government and what we're given from council taxpayers, even with some of these increases. Luckily, Mr Mayor, we are saved by the investment strategy that this council's had over the last few years that basically plugs a £4 million hole, I think, in the next 3 years into a £1.5 million gap, deficit, call it what you will, which is Chorley's way of dealing with this by raising some of our own income by some of the investments that we've managed to do. So we have took steps, Mr Mayor, to deal with some of the issues that we have to deal with. But what we also have to realise is that we are in certain times. We have no certainty of funding or certain funding streams. We have the risk of rising prices and rising costs, which members are seeing through RPI going up, through even yesterday CCH putting their rents up 4.0%. Costs are going up to the tune of 4, 5 and higher percentages. Wages are going up. All these things are going up. So what we need to do, Mr Mayor, is protect the council by putting up the council tax by 1.99% in common with many of our other councils in Lancashire. By also, Mr Mayor, recognising that we are less than many others, particularly the County Council, the Police and the Fire Service, who are raising council tax by the most. Also, Mr Mayor, to focus on the delivery of those remaining capital amounts that are detailed in paragraph 58, and the fact that some of that has slipped into future years, but also, Mr Mayor, that some of our borrowing costs have come down comparatively to previous years and will come down further in terms of the amount of actual interest we're paying on borrowing. And basically, Mr Mayor, to have a plan for Chorley that's both a coherent and organised plan when many others don't have a plan or appear to have a plan in place of how to structure local government finance. Mr Mayor, I think that the proposals in this budget are sensible, they're not radical, they're what we need at this point in time. I'm happy to detail the paragraph, the recommendations detailed in A to K of the recommendations in paragraph 2. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm very happy to follow Councillor Bradley in proposing this administration's budget for the forthcoming year. Starting my remarks by reiterating the thank you not only to the officers and the finance team for the work in helping the administration draw up the budget, but I also place on the appreciation of the work done by Councillor Wilson as the exec member and the entire cabinet and the wider Labour group in terms of the budget that we're proposing this evening. Start the remarks, Mr Mayor, by drawing members' attention to the paragraph in the report in what this authority is having to put up with of a reduction in funding from 17.6 million, which was there in 16-17, to an estimated 13.5 million by 24-25. There's still major challenges within the budget process, and that is identified at paragraph 39 of the report and the budget deficit that this authority is being met with and having to cope with. How we're bridging the budget gap is highlighted on paragraphs 44 onwards, but I'd just bring members' attention to page 78 of the report and actually give some indication of what this budget actually is proposing. We're proposing £0.9 million of revenue investment and a capital programme of 56 million. And let's go through the 4 corporate strategic objectives. An ambitious council that does more to meet the needs of residents in the local area, about creating £200,000 of grant funding to make improvements in other areas across the borough to help with health and wellbeing and local areas. To create a £30,000 fund to refresh Checkout Chorley to ensure visitors continue to use our beautiful borough as a place to visit. A strong local economy. Investing a further £200,000 in a refreshed and refocused package of support and grants for businesses, but also we're investing £200,000 to develop our approach to apprenticeships, graduate and high market demand, investing in the future, Mr Mayor. Going on to the third one, involving residents in improving the local area, a further investment of £240,000 to support the climate fund, to put money, extra money into the next one of an investment of 2.7 million and an additional 74,000 to deliver improvements, particularly at Milestone Meadow, but quite a few other areas as well. Affordable housing. the council has made significant improvements in our leisure centre over the years, and we're investing or proposing to invest £2 million as a continued commitment to improve our leisure centres. All that, Mr Mayor, is a very positive budget that invests in our residents, invest in the future of our residents. And I'll just end with paragraph 62 of the report, and that shares, in terms of conclusion, we're producing a balanced budget for 22-23. We're making prudent inroads in terms of getting the budget deficit down at the end of the 3-year period. We are meeting the challenges, and as Councillor Bradley has said, there's so much financial uncertainty. I welcome this and wholeheartedly second the proposals, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Lowe. I'm advised that prior to debating the main item, Councillor Chapman wishes to propose an amendment seconded by Councillor Boardman. Is that correct?
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you also to the Director of Finance and her staff for the assistance they provided in bringing these proposals together for you tonight. I must apologise that they have arrived late in the day. Our discussions were interrupted on Friday when we were expecting some further analysis from the Council, when I believe there was a power cut which impacted the Council quite a bit. And so discussions that would have taken place or analysis that would have taken place then was not available till Monday, and consequently you only have that. So my apologies for that. I'm hoping, Councillor Bradley, you've paid the lucky bill now, and and we can manage. Yes, indeed. If you remember nothing else from what I say tonight, please remember this. When you go home, when it's all said and done and possibly forgotten, please remember to go sit down and get yourself onto a price comparison website. This is something I did a couple of weeks ago. I knew what was coming, but I did it anyway. And what was coming was worse than I thought. Get yourself onto the price comparison website and have your gas and electricity bill in your hand, because it will tell you how much you use in a year. And then you can punch in the details, and then you can find out how much gas and electric prices would be if you were signing up for the first time today. And you'll find it's scary. We're not talking just about the 50-odd% that might go up in April and who knows after that in October. We're talking about prices that are not capped. And then think about the residents who will be just having those excessive increases in cost. Now, we don't need to go into much politics on this tonight, because even Channel 4 News, even the BBC, agree that it's not Boris and it's not Brexit, that it's a combination of other factors, including COVID disruptions, including maybe what a certain Russian gentleman might be doing, and other factors which all press on the amount of money that people have to spend on things that they need. And in those circumstances, it falls on us as people in public authorities to make sure that we don't add to the burden if we don't need to. And I think if you have a look, you'll see that our proposals all fit within the same strictures that Councillor Bradley was talking about earlier. All of those proposals fit within the medium-term financial strategy. And so I've come to the conclusion that we don't need to increase the council tax. We don't need to make life any more expensive. But there's another reason that you shouldn't be thinking about increasing the council tax. It gives us a chance to send a message to residents that we get it, that we understand that their local councillors, all of us, not just my group, all of us understand the pressures that they are facing. We need to show them that we have got their back. And so that 0% would make a difference, not just as an amount of money, but also as a message of support. And we also need to do our part to avoid turning what experts say should be a temporary period of raised inflation into what could be a prices and wages spiral. If everybody just bumps everything up by a little bit more, and then the next lot of people do the same, then it's a dangerous position to be in. I don't want to go back to the 1970s. I'd like us to be able to get into a period of low inflation again. And I think we all need to do our bit to do that. So why do I think that we can afford it? Well, we have savings identified in the medium-term financial strategy that can be worked up over a period of time, which are in excess of the deficit from what is a fairly pessimistic set of analysis. I think it was Councillor Gordon France who at the last Cabinet meeting commented that he'd been told by officers that the document was pessimistic. I don't mean to criticise you, Councillor France, or indeed the officers. I think it's rightly pessimistic. You have to be careful when you're talking about the Council's finances. But we've also got to recognise that chances are that not all these things that could go against us will go against us. And that, as with previous years, we're likely to be in a much better scenario. But even our proposals are kept within that scenario because there is the possibility of the savings that the officers have identified as possible, but also because of the very items that Councillor Lowe highlighted on page 78. There we have a number of different pots of monies realised from funding that's come through, set against officer time, underspends that are all now being pushed into reserves and which have nice names attached to them, you know, laudable things that we want to achieve. But it's 200,000 here, 200,000 there, 240 there. And I think people, you know, can probably see that with those nice big six-figure round numbers, those are not yet planned. Those are not yet things that we have to do. It's things that we have a choice as to whether we do them. And so we therefore have a choice not to do them. In a moment, Councillor Boardman will talk about some of our other initiatives, but I did want to talk about our proposal for free parking on council car parks for battery electric vehicles, or BEVs. Now, I understand that the members of the other group are fond of BEVs, so I'm hoping I'm on a winner here. We have an issue in that not very far away, across our borders in Greater Manchester's moves towards the clean air zone, not going very well. They're going to have to be redone. And my general approach is to prefer the carrot to the stick, and that maybe, you've seen the figures that we've given you, there's only 1% effectively of the cars on the road which are 100% battery electric vehicles. I should possibly declare an interest in that I own one of them. If anybody else wants to indicate their ownership, they can. But it looks like I need to invite you to join me in the 1%. There's a phrase I never thought I'd get away with. We need to reward and encourage people to move towards what will be 100%. From 2030, you will only be able to buy ultra-low emission vehicles. And if we're on 1% now, there's a great deal of gap to be filled. And it would be useful for the council, at really very minimal cost, to give some encouragement to people and let them see the way forward and let them act on that. So, in terms of improving the environment and reducing pollution, I would recommend that to you. But don't forget what I've said, that with regard to the council tax reduction, we don't have to raise the prices. We need to show local people that we get it, and we don't need to turn a spike in inflation into a spiral. So I would suggest you support the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman. Councillor Boardman, on a second.
Mr Mayor, thank you, Councillor Chapman, for that. I get the two easy projects, actually, which is quite nice for me to explain. For some time now, I've canvassed for our fantastic youth zone to be accessible to more and accessible to others, especially in the rural areas. We do applaud our youth zone and our youth zone workers. They've had a really tough couple of years. They've had to close the doors, reopen the doors, close the doors again, reopen. And they've been up and down, and they've had children in and out, and their numbers are low, their numbers are high. So we need to address the issue here. Over the past couple of years, take-up of the youth zone from the rural areas has been low. It has been low, we know that. They've gone some way with some funding that the administration gave them, £20,000, on an outreach programme, which went out to some of the rural villages, some of the further out town areas, to offer some of their services. But what we're not doing is basically taking the facility, the whole facility, to the rural areas and rural children. What we need to do is look at bringing those children into such a fantastic facility. I've spoken to many young people in the areas that I live and work. I spent a lot of time around Croston, Maudsley, Eccleston, Bretherton, Charnock Richard. In fact, too much time, I can never out of there. But and the common consensus is that the teenagers in the villages, boys and girls, they struggle to get to the youth zone. There isn't a safe and reliable bus service after a certain time at night. But then as a parent, I wouldn't let my 11 or 12-year-old or 13-year-old get on a bus on their own into Chorley and then travel back again at 8 o'clock in the evening. That being said, we'd like to support the youth zone even further. As a council, we've got the facility to put in place basically a bus, a transport service. It's like the old youth club, what we used to love when we were kids. The youth club bus will go and pick you up and take to the youth club. It's a costed out proposal. It doesn't cost us the council much money whatsoever. We're looking at it purely as a trial at the moment and a pilot scheme, and we're looking for, say, a timetable based on one regular evening per week from the different rural areas, coming into the youth zone, say 6 p.m. in the evening, going back at 8 p.m. Later on in the evening. Nothing wrong with that. Safe and secure. Drivers all checked out. Employed by either the youth zone or the council. Really nice proposal, something that we can do to attract more use of the youth zone. I have a 13-year-old lad. He is a member. His membership has waived a little bit, to be honest. He's not been for a couple of years. I asked him the other day, would you go to the youth zone with your friends if there was a bus running from the village? Of course I would. What night is it? So, well, you've only got Thursday because you do something every other night. But, you know, the crux is there. There is a requirement for it. We'd just like to pilot it, and we'd like to put that forward to you. The next one is the feasibility study to develop a drop-in customer service facilities for vulnerable residents. Again, it's taking out the council services to the people in our villages, our rural areas, our smaller towns of Adlington and around those areas too. The reason this has come forward because, again, lots of people are elderly and vulnerable and live in the sheltered housing schemes that Jigsaw run. Find it very difficult to get any kind of input from Jigsaw these days. The community wardens are spread very thinly across a number of facilities. They don't offer the same kind of service they used to do when it was under Chorley's wing, let me tell you. Those wardens are in and out, maybe an hour a week into the facility and out. They can't get the advice they need. We'd like to take our council services out to those people. Lots of these sheltered housing schemes have the community facilities that are underused. They're left for the residents to maintain and manage, would you believe, and at a premium that they pay for on their rents. So if we can use them, utilise them, bring our services, Mr Mayor, out to the rural areas, out to the elderly and vulnerable, I think we will do a good deed for the people of Chorley and the surrounding areas. There are 4 proposals which all fit in, as Councillor Chapman said, with the short-term strategy. The figures have been checked and double-checked. We'd like you to support them as amendments to the budget. They don't have a significant impact on your budget at all. The bare bones of yours is still there, and we'd like you to support them. Councillor Chapman has proposed them, and I will happily second them, Mr Mayor.
Councillor Bradley, do you wish to take that as a friendly amendment or do you wish to not?
I'd rather listen to other members first.
Right, okay. Anyone else wish to speak and debate on this? Yes, Councillor.
Happy to yield to Councillor Clifford, who's about a second before me.
Sorry, I missed that. Councillor Clifford.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Warm words earlier from the opposition regarding the environment, but I see the Tory group are looking to raid our Green Agenda budget. That was not mentioned earlier. That's what you do if you're in charge. It is absolutely disgraceful. This money is committed to protect our environment in Chorley and mitigate against the worst effects of climate change. What would your children think of for robbing from it? Do you see the Green Agenda Fund as a pot to rob from when, like a bank, and we know your history on banks, the old Icelandic bank, do you actually think that the Green Agenda Fund is known as the Greenland Bank? You know, it's not. It's for making sure our environment's protected. And because of what you've suggested there, taking money out of that Green Agenda Fund, reducing it, I certainly can't support your amendments. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Can I give way to Councillor Abbott first, please?
Councillor Nevitt.
Yeah, thanks for that, Mr. Mayor. I'll try and start with a positive. And that's just to pay a tribute, and that's a tribute I know Councillor Wilson's already heard, but also a tribute to Councillor Bradley and all of the officers. Looking at sort of page 75 on the report, paragraph 46, we see there that more than half of the anticipated deficit is going to be covered by investments. Those are investments that were only made by a Labour-run council. Those were investments that we wouldn't have had if it was a Conservative administration that was in power for the last few years. So that's where I'd like to start with a positive. Notwithstanding Councillor Chapman's apology for the late notice of the budget, to receive a budget amendment at 10:23 this morning, to be quite frank, is pretty unbecoming of a party that would like to consider itself as forming an administration at any point in the future. I note that Councillor Chapman said these proposals were due to be discussed on Friday. To be frank, I think even that's quite late for something as serious as this. Never mind. So, of course, a key part of their amendment is discussing this council tax increase. And I think if we're all going to turn to page 235, which is included in the to follow papers, we're anticipating that the council tax increase will, on your average Band E property, cost £3.88 a year. And to supplement what Councillor Bradley said, that's actually the lowest of all the councils that are increasing it. To put it in perspective, I think that's your average lunch, perhaps a sandwich and a drink. But if we look at the increase that we're seeing at county, £58.10 a year, which of course many members on this side of the aisle will have been happy to approve, it starts to become quite a boozy lunch, perhaps a more conservative lunch there. I think that's what's going to hit people the hardest, not the £3.88. And so what we've got here, of course, we've heard the start of this is the government underfunding that we've faced for years. And of course also higher operating costs that the council faces. I noticed, as members will have done, rising fuel prices. June 2020, you used to pull up a petrol station, it cost you 99.7 pence per litre. Went past Morrison's yesterday, it's up to 146.7 pence. It's an increase of 47% in the price of fuel. Of course, the council has to bear that as well with its considerable council fleet. So it's understandable that there has to be a council tax increase somewhere. But lastly, let's get to where the Conservatives want to get these savings from to avoid that £3.88 on average every year that we're asking households to pay. We're wanting to slash £151,000 from apprenticeships and training. It's a time when we want to get more people into work, more people into jobs, more people on a secure income. As Councillor Clifford said, they want to take £10,000 from the Green Agenda at a time when the opposition presumably think the race to net zero in 2030 and countering climate change should be a key priority of this council. And lastly, of course, wanting to raid £36,000 from play areas, which I think many residents in those outlying areas would be quite dismayed at. So overall, as Councillor Clifford said, fairly disappointed with this amendment. I think if the Conservative group had spent a bit more time, they wouldn't have been so cavalier in the numbers. I appreciate they're trying to reach a balanced budget, but Councillor Boardman said there would be no significant impact as a result of that. I'd like him to say that to young people who he'd be slashing opportunities from. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ainsworth and Councillor Riggett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. First of all, I'd like to commend this Labour administration for continuing to invest £85k to continue to sustain key bus routes in the borough, as noted on agenda page 114. This includes the 118 service, which route includes Collingwood Road. This service provides much needed lifeline for residents in Chorley North West Ward, in particular to residents who don't drive and are elderly, in order that they can travel to and from our town centre. It's this Labour administration 4 years ago that committed to subsidising local bus routes in order to ensure residents could access all parts of the borough. It wasn't this Labour administration continuing to invest in these vital bus services. These probably would have been cut or stopped altogether by Conservative-led Lancashire County Council. I am sure that residents in North West Ward will welcome the fact that their local bus routes will continue to run in the ward along with other key local bus services within the Chorley Borough. Since Labour took control 10 years ago, I feel that Chorley has become a much better place to live, work and to visit, thanks to continued investment and hard work by this Labour administration. So I fully support this budget this evening on our side of the chamber. Thank you.
Just remind me,
Just to remind members, we're debating the
amendment.
The amendment, yeah. not the Labour budget. Yeah. So, right, Councillor Riggett.
Thank you for that clarification, because I was about to ask for that. I wasn't actually intending to speak to this because I thought, well, I learned from you, Mr Mayor, I'll constantly repeat that line. I thought Councillor Chapman and Councillor Boardman spoke really well, and I wasn't going to speak on this particularly, but I thought Councillor Clifford's comments and what he's got against the people of Greenland just thought needed a response. We're talking about raiding a budget. I can't recall off the top of my head the large six-figure sum currently in the Climate Change Emergency Fund, but I believe it's a significant hundreds of thousands of pounds. I think this request is for £10,000 a year for 3 years. That is hardly raiding the budget in my view, and also I believe that's the council budget. It's not Councillor Clifford's budget and what his view should be, because he's just one member of this council and all hands out count equal when the hands go up. And I agree with Councillor Chapman that it's actually, the carrot is really important here, because myself and the leader, when we've had conversations, have talked about things like the journeys to getting to people using more electric cars, to ground heat pumps, and how some of those things could work. And we both admitted that neither of us had made that step yet into joining Sam and being part of the BEV club. Now, I do find it interesting as well that I believe all the Councillor Chapman referenced a declaration there when a number of people are zealot-like about this agenda on the opposite side, and I do see them arriving a number of vehicles at a car park we share just down the road that I don't think strike me as low-emission diesel or petrol cars either, or certainly not on a bike or anything like that. So I think there has to be a touch of realism, and that's my point here. This is the kind of thing that ticks our agenda for me, a council that's ambitious and does more. This kind of thing might just tempt me to consider making that step to moving away from a diesel car to something more environmentally friendly a little bit earlier. And I think it ties in with what Councillor Bradley said earlier, where I think it makes a good case about maybe we need to consider the trade-off between low mileage short journeys within our district, within our town centre, as opposed to long motorway journeys back to Middlebrook and back. And I think that further supports this agenda. So I'm really, really disappointed if the members opposite can't take that line and give that some support. Thank you.
Councillor Cullens, then Councillor Morwood, then Councillor Boardman. Councillor Cullens.
Thank you very much, Mr Mayor. Quite interesting, I think, again, and quite fascinated in some of the comments of Councillor Clifford. We're robbing Peter, but paying Paul. Could I just say that any money that we're taking out of that green budget is for a green initiative? So, not quite certain where you're actually coming from here. The other thing I'd remind Councillor Clifford as well, I had the pleasure of listening to him last night at a different meeting, and he was trying to talk last night about keeping costs down for residents, and went on at some length about literally the vulnerability that many people will be having. This was just in connection with raising £1 for the summer fair. What I'm hearing tonight is we're happy to charge residents £5 to go into Astley Hall. But, you know, I think we've got to think seriously. And something Councillor Nevitt said, I thought, again, was very interesting in the factor of that we presented late our amendments and that we should, if we want to be in control, we should literally think seriously about that of what, you know, giving time. For those who watched last week's county debate, that Labour actually produced their amendment to it as the leader got up to speak. So I think if we shouldn't be in charge here, I'm darn sure that Labour won't and never will be in charge at county. Yeah. I think one of the things that also to look at as well is as far as you mentioned the county budget, it is significant, yes, but of that 3.99%, 2% is about protecting the vulnerable and the elderly. It's on the social care budget. And I think that's partly, you know, something that we should be proud of to say that, you know, and it was well supported by the Labour group at county. But I think one of the things that just to mention to you that what Councillor Chapman said about pessimism. And I think if you actually look at some of the paper that's coming forward tomorrow, that we're predicting an underspend of this council of 1.192 million. And I would just remind this council that this has been an underspending council for year after year after year. So whether that money's come from grant, whether it's actually come from the, you know, the taxpayer, we've been an underspending council. And I think by deferring any increase, you know, that it stops that pessimism. I think we can answer that next year, but it gives literally, we are in a difficult situation at the moment. Many people, petrol prices going up, heating going up, etc. What we can do to the residents, I think, is essential.
Thank you, Chair. I hope I'll bring a little calm to this. Councillor Bradley said he wanted to hear thoughts from members, and I'm going to avoid politics for a minute and just look at what you've suggested. I'm going to leave the council tax because I'm sure Councillor Bradley can wax lyrical about that particular point, and it's already been talked about already. Personally, I think we have to stick with what we've proposed. I'm going to look at the other three. The free parking for the electric vehicles, the 100% electric vehicles. At the moment, I think they get free electric anyway. So they're already getting a bit of a benefit by going in and getting free electric to charge their vehicles. We don't have a horrendous car parking charge. It's unfortunate that you know, they can't charge their vehicle in the free hour or the free 3 hours, but I really can't go with giving them free parking. They're very expensive, these cars. If I hope to survive to 2030, and I'll be over the moon if we're all driving electric cars by then, but I cannot see it, not in a million years, not unless the cost comes down substantially. I mean, let's face it, your ordinary person is not going to run around in an electric vehicle at the cost they are at the moment. Not a hope in hell. So we'll leave that one. I like your idea I'm absolutely in favour of providing some kind of transport for the youth zone. And what I would suggest is, what members probably don't like is where you're suggesting the money comes from. And obviously, as open spaces is slightly in my area. I would like to see it coming from my particular budget. However, could we perhaps look at that idea and perhaps look at where the money might come from in other ways, so that we're not, I say, coming out, raiding the play and open space, and certainly not cutting back on apprenticeships. We already had the Mayor this evening talking about going to these events with the apprenticeships. There's no way we can cut back on apprenticeships. It's an essential. There's a lack of skills already. I was in education far too long to say you've got to cut back on apprenticeships. So I applaud the idea. Can we look at maybe where the money comes from somewhere else? And as for the feasibility study, again, I don't see why not, personally. But I wouldn't want it to come from the support for apprentices. So perhaps again, I suggest your ideas are good. I just think perhaps people think maybe the money can come from somewhere else. I'm not in charge of it. No, I'm sure that, but it's the idea. Well, when I say others are more economically minded, I think you get the idea of where I'm coming from. Thank you.
Councillor Boardman.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and thank you, councillors, for your comments, valued comments. I'd like you to bring back some kind of normality. It was a friendly proposal that was put forward. We didn't want to get into a row or a battle about it. But if a councillor stands up and speaks, speak eloquently, they deserve a response. You know, Councillor, you mentioned about your green credentials and everything you speak about is green. I would argue that green is actually naive in your case. You should look at the fact that the actual spending is coming from the green agenda budget. Okay? And I'd just like to, look at your document. None of the projects are scoped out. These are pots of money for projects. All we're asking you to do is to actually vote for that one project within that pot of money. We've been very careful not to raid your pots. We've been very careful to align our projects with your pots. Okay? Councillor Nevitt. Investment projects that are bringing in a surplus and an income which enables this administration to deliver these projects. Where do you think the money's come from for these investment projects, Councillor Nevitt? Further on in your documentation, you'll see £100 million of debt. That debt has come from the government. That debt is public money. That is the money that we put in the pockets of this government. They distribute back out to us as a council. So we wouldn't be in this fortunate position if we hadn't borrowed the money in the first place. And apprenticeships and training. For someone that runs a small business and actually employs apprentices, there is an absolute wash out there of apprenticeships. Apprenticeships funding, apprenticeships being available. Every college in our local area offers it and offers some fantastic support. The CITB offer it and offer fantastic support. Lancashire County Council also offer it and fantastic support. I probably get 2 apprenticeship businesses ringing me once a week. So I'm trying to work out what surely can actually deliver for £200,000 worth of investment within the apprenticeship scheme within this borough. Because as far as I'm concerned, it's pretty well administered at the minute. It was a friendly proposal and it still is a friendly proposal, and we'd much rather have you adopt them, including the the freezing of the council tax for this one financial year, just to align us with our friendly neighbours, South Ribble. Thank you.
Could I just remind members, please, to speak to me through the chair rather than to each other? That way we have a more civilised and orderly meeting. Councillor Bradley, I'm going to bring you in, and then I've got Councillor Hesina Khan to follow.
If we talk about the Conservative proposal.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. In response to my friend, Councillor Boardman, I totally agree with you that young people need to be transported into Chorley for youth activities. However, I'd also like to remind you that it was Tory-led Lancashire County Council which actually scrapped the youth services, the very service used to transport children into Chorley.
Right, Councillor Bradley.
Well, Mr Mayor. So yeah, friendly. You're quite right, Asina. You don't forget. We don't forget. I think to move business, Mr Mayor, unfortunately we cannot support on this side a proposal to freeze council tax for the very reasons it states in the report at paragraph 25, which says if the council was to freeze council tax, it would create a gap over the medium term between the amount of funding the government assumes it has, i.e. we have, and the amount it actually generates. That is the fundamental reason. So it's not about a choice, it's about a hard choice for Chorley residents in the future that we're going to have to put the money back up in the future when the government's taken it off us. So the first proposal, we cannot support, Mr Mayor. The next proposals, and I think, Councillor Chapman, you're a bit disingenuous about your power cut. You don't give us the ideas early because we steal them. So on the basis that we'd steal a couple of them, number 2 is probably stealable, paid for by Councillor Clifford and the Climate Change Working Group, of which he... So he wins. So he wins. Item 3, which is the improved, we did put the youth on and us paid for bus services to come into Chorley. They weren't utilised, Councillor Boardman, very much, and people didn't turn up, probably because, like you just alluded to, teenagers in particular have very busy lives and they've got different things on every night. We are running satellite clubs in Clayton, Coppell and Eccleston, I understand, at the moment. That has been affected by COVID as well, because it wasn't the best thing to be busing young people around the borough in a confined space through COVID, given that the rates are rife anyway, as people, you will be aware from the numbers. We can, I think, commit, and I'm looking at Councillor Murray here because it's her budget, to reinstigating that post-COVID as part of the COVID bounce back with the youth zone to do that busing in. But it behoves those young people taking advantage of that, and I would actually link it, Mr Mayor, through the parish councils. I think the parish councils have a job to do here to get their young people to take this up and to encourage them to do that, because they know how to get to those people. So I'm happy to steal that idea as well. Number 4, Mr Mayor, I don't really understand, if I'm quite honest, the feasibility about drop-in centres. What I think this alludes to, Mr Mayor, is very much, Councillor Whittaker will be aware of it, it's things like the Eccleston Centre on the Fields, where, again, because of COVID, CCH cut their centre, took the keys off the residents who used to control the openings, etc., and took that facility away. I think others have referred to that kind of as facility. I think, Mr Mayor, there is a job of work here to do with those housing providers who have a duty, who make an awful lot of money out of some of those areas, to reopen those facilities. They can be drop-in centres in those villages where there is a critical mass of those kind of properties, but also we can support that through the community budgets, again, that we're doing, with the outreach work that we're doing from existing spends that are allocated, as you point out, but aren't specified what they're there for. So I think those 3 things we could support. I think Councillor Lowe totted them up at £51,000. We think that is able to be put back into the budget, but we would want to defend the reduction in council tax, and there's no way we can accept that to a freeze, because it cuts our base budget. But the monies can probably be found from some of the existing budgets that we've got to do just those very things. Yeah. Is that a sensible proposal, Mr Mayor?
It's a sensible proposal. Quite how we administer it is another matter.
Well,
and I'm going to take advice from the Chief Executive.
Yeah, go on, Carol.
I'm happy with Councillor Bradley, and 3 out of 4 is good for us. We'll take that as a win. And I'd make a proposal that we'll, in light of what you said, we'll move an amendment that will...
The amendment.
Sorry?
An amendment to the amendment.
Amendment to the amendment.
Yes, right.
Mr Mayor, amendment to the amendment that we will accept a vote on items 2, 3 and 4. Mr Mayor. I'm just looking for a seconder.
Hold on.
Deborah, sorry.
Councillor Platt.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'll second that proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Bradley.
The only bit of that, Mr Mayor, is we can't support the removal of that money from those budgets specific. We will find the budget for money from existing budget allocations that aren't specified.
So it doesn't affect the budget.
Does that make sense? It's not a slush fund.
No.
It's an unspecified budget.
Councillor Rigger.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I understand where Councillor Bradley's coming from on taking it from the budgets, but surely item 2 should come from that budget, because that's clearly what it's identified for, if you're reading items potentially 3 and 4. So that's for my clarity. I thought he did a rather good job of walking back Councillor Clifford's absolute denial of not doing that, but it seems like we are, so that was most welcome. And all I wanted to suggest to proposals 3 and 4 was for item 3, could we also consider not working with the existing voluntary youth clubs that we have? For example, myself and Councillor Platt run one in Buckshall Village that people know well, and I'm sure we'd gladly give up a Friday night to allow everybody to come to the youth zone instead. And suggest possibly for item 4 that we also consider using the libraries that are fortunately still open spread across Chorley. We have a good spread, and the more we can get people in there, I'm sure they would allow an opportunity for somebody to sit and be a contact for services, and it helps Crow and keep those viable for a number of other areas. Thank you.
I'm going to propose we have a time-out, because this is quite complicated and we need to get it right. Councillor Snape.
Yeah, it was just a point to note, really. Under item 3, improved access to youth zone facilities for young people in rural areas. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that Stagecoach offer a £1 return, a £1 return offer. I mean, we've done a lot of work in Adlington and Heath Charnock to promote that to young people. So it might be a suggestion, it's for the 125 route, that perhaps those colleagues that represent Clayton Brook, Clayton Woods, Whitley Woods, that they also promote that to their younger residents as well, because I understood it's relatively well utilised in Adlington and Heath Charnock. Thank you.
We're trying desperately to get some consensus here in order to enable us to try and do that in a manner that stacks up. I propose we have 10 minutes. 5 minutes.
Yeah.
5 minutes time out when we try and find a meeting. Right. My understanding is, and Gary will correct me if I'm wrong, is that we're going to separate the council tax increase from the rest of the recommendations proposed by the Conservative group. Take that first, and that will be what it will be. And then we will then vote on this amendment, which will be part of the substantive motion.
Or is that 2 votes then?
No, no.
3 votes.
On the substantive, you don't 2 votes, 1 vote on the substantive second, which would be including this amendment.
Right.
And we're voting on the amendment,
2 votes.
amendment, 2 votes.
Yeah, 2.
Right.
We take this as part of the substantive.
Councillor Riggett, I don't want to de-democratise this area, but
Right.
we need to press on.
Just do the amendment first. Vote on the amendment to freeze council tax, and then we'll address this. And then
Well,
Right. Councillor Boardman, do you want to introduce the new amendment to separate?
Can I?
No, Gary.
Yeah, can I help? Right. So we're going to take the council tax amendment separately. Yeah, we'll vote on that. There'll be a recorded vote. Yeah. And then we're going to add this to the substantive budget and vote on that.
So this is a friendly amendment.
Because it's a friendly amendment. Well, we haven't debated it yet, but we can do.
We haven't debated, but also, should this not be separate to the...
Well, that's what I'm asking. So that's 3 votes, Chris.
We
can do the fifth. Because we haven't debated the substantive motion.
No, but Alistair can propose an amendment to the substantive motion before we take a vote on it. So he's abandoning the original one.
But it requires the opposition group to vote the whole vote. And you're voting for a council tax increase, which
Yes,
you're
but
voting
that's
against.
only one vote,
So you can't.
including that amendment.
No, you can't. You can't. Because you'd be voting for a council tax increase, which they're opposing. So you can't.
Okay.
So
Right.
we have to take it 3.
I think so. That's what I thought originally.
We vote for the council tax increase by default.
Yeah. Which they voted against.
Right.
Yeah.
I can't, I'm sorry, but I can't see how that can stand on its own.
Because
It's our amendment. We will make that amendment.
But it is. Sorry, I might have misunderstood the position, but were you accepting that as a friendly amendment to your budget? Because that was my understanding. So the substantive budget would go through subject to that being included within it. Was that not?
In which case it's not friendly.
Yeah.
So therefore, better incorporating the amendment into the substantive thing out.
No. Because then they'll be voting for a council tax increase that they've just voted against.
One amendment we're going to vote against.
Yeah.
And one amendment we're going to vote for. But then we still have to go back to the substantive.
Yeah, if it is the case, yeah, okay. I'm all right with that. Sorry, I thought the substantive proposal had been amended to incorporate that, so it's not, okay.
So let me get this right. Councillor Boardman, you're proposing in the first instance that there is a council tax freeze, and we're voting on that. Is that correct? Yes, please.
Let's just walk through that so everybody's clear.
The second one then will be...
Those
This
things
amendment.
Which I've not read properly yet. But
It was on that screen, yeah.
So that will be then,
Absorbed.
yeah. It's the point at which it's included, Chris, isn't it?
Yeah.
Should be.
Yeah, and this is the problem.
Look
Once
at
the
the
budget's
addition.
approved, that you can't amend it. So if you want that to be incorporated, it's taken as a full document.
So in which case we'd have to take some of the recommendations separately on the substantive motion.
I think the problem I see here is that we vote on the zero council tax amendment separately.
Hold on.
We then, hang on, no, let me finish.
No, it's all right. Let me come in, Steve. Right. So this, because this is funded from general reserves, it's not part of the substantive budget. It's additional. So it's fine. So it doesn't need to be included as part of the substantive. Fine. Okay. Sorted. It does.
Right.
We're committing the expenditure and to fund it from reserves.
Right, I'm going to get the first bit out of the way, and then we will see where we get with the next bit, otherwise we'll be here all night. And that wine's getting warm. Right, okay.
Park up, just do one.
Right, we'll do one and then we'll park and sort out the next bit. Right, Councillor Boardman, could you propose the...
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to propose an amendment, and it's a freeze to the council tax budget for 1 year.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to second that proposal.
We've already debated this, so we will go straight to a vote, if that's okay with everyone. It will be a recorded and named vote. Chief Exec.
Okay. So, for the amendment, or against the amendment, Councillor Berry.
I'm not sure.
Against. Councillor Ainsworth. Councillor Beaver. Councillor Boardman. Councillor Bradley. Councillor Chapman. Councillor Clifford. Councillor Cullens. Sorry, Councillor Alan Cullens. Councillor Magda Cullens. Councillor Dalton. Councillor Derbyshire. Absent. Councillor France. Councillor, Gordon France. Councillor Margaret France. Councillor Gabbett. Councillor Danny G. Councillor Gray. Councillor Heaton. Councillor Howarth. Councillor Idden. Councillor Hasina Khan. Councillor Samir Khan. Councillor Zora Khan. Councillor Law. Councillor Lynch is absent. Councillor Molyneux. Councillor Morwood. Councillor Murray. Councillor Nevitt. Councillor Alan Platt. Councillor Deborah Platt. Councillor Riggett. Councillor Sherwood. Councillor Snape. Councillor Simmons. Councillor Turner. Councillor Walker. Councillor Whiffin. Councillor Whittaker. Okay.
Do I have a vote?
You can do if you want one. Councillor Holgate.
Against. Right.
Hold on. No. Calm down.
Go on. We're having a result of it. He's got his abacus out.
Yep. Okay. So it's lost. 24.
Right, so it's lost 13 to 24. We now move to
The amendment.
voting on the amendment. Councillor Boardman, is that your amendment or is it a joint amendment?
Right. If we just change the wording to say from underspends in this current financial year, then it's not part of the budget setting. Well, it's not.
No, it isn't, but this is a vote on the budget.
It's not. It's not this.
The substantive motion is the budget, Gary.
Yeah, but we're
to take a vote on it needs to sit outside the budget because effectively the offer is to incorporate it into the budget proposal.
If we incorporate that into the budget proposal, we
Then
can
you
vote
have to
for
take the
that,
budget
but
as a
that
whole.
puts you in a position where you're going to have to vote for an increase in council tax. So that's the quandary we need to get over. But it's still an amendment. It needs to be a motion.
But it's got to be an amendment of the substantive motion. The substantive motion is the budget document.
Which increases council tax. Councillor Cullens. if you, can we have some quiet, please? Sorry.
Debate the substantive motion now and take a vote on that motion, then take a vote on additional.
Once you've voted on the substantive motion, that item's ended. There can't be any further amendment to it. Now,
But it's not an amendment.
You could bring it as a new motion.
You could bring it as a new proposal.
Yes.
Perhaps that's the way forward.
Yes.
Additional budgetary item.
Yes.
It's just a notice of motion. It's fine. You can dress it up as what you want.
Can I allow that?
Yeah, in the circumstances.
If it makes progress, I'll allow it. And if it's legal.
Present this as an additional budgetary item as a notice of motion.
Yes.
All right, then.
Can we do that now?
After we've done
After we've done the, right.
After we've done the substantive. Yes.
Right. We're now to a position where we're going to debate the substantive motion.
Budget.
It's already been spoken to by many people already. Do we wish to continue that debate, or do we wish to go to a vote?
Well, it's been done. It's been done.
If it's been done, if there's no comment, we can move to it.
Right, we'll move to the vote.
No,
if that-
Councillor
okay.
Riggett.
Councillor Riggett. Okay, speak.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Bradley. Before we move on, as you know, I'm a fairly new councillor and a fairly new resident of Chorley. And when I got my council tax bill, the first one, it had special expenses. What exactly are the special expenses? And why, if they're rolled over year after year, are they called special? Because obviously they're not special. And obviously this year you are seeing an increase. And obviously it is another increase on the council tax. Thank you.
I could let Councillor Platt, we have this every year, Councillor Turner. I'd rather you referred and speak to the director who will tell you exactly what each special expense is than take it from me, because I'm probably as confused as you are, okay, if that helps, because they are special expenses, but because they've rolled on year after year after year, they become special expenses that are special every year. So I asked the same question myself, because they generally relate to specific areas and parish councils, which I'm not particularly bounded by. So I think it's far better if you take it up with the directors. I'm sure they'll go on at length, and if you're interested in a specific area, they can go into that specific area, special expenses. But what we need to be aware of is it's different in different areas. So the special expenses are different in different areas, and therefore, for that very reason, they were created in the past as a fix to something. They should be unwound at some point, but they aren't.
Councillor, are you satisfied in having a written response?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yes, I would like a written response. A written response, because I have to actually answer to my residents, and they actually want to know what they are.
Right.
Councillor Riggett.
Councillor Riggett, and then we're going to go to a vote. Oh, Councillor Boardman. Right.
I'm sure I could quote you, Mr Mayor, on the needs for proper debate and democracy and, shutting down debate. I've got your speeches lined up, or, you do that regularly, and now you're doing it to us. I think the special expenses, I'm really glad Councillor Turner raised that, because some members were probably experienced, myself and Councillor Wilson, having a little bit of maybe support on this, trying to get an understanding of it. And I think not only do maybe all members need an explanation about it, I think it's actually really disappointing that the leader of the council and at scrutiny, the portfolio holder couldn't explain it to members how much tax we intended to levy on residents and how it is spent. To the fact that Councillor Wilson said to me, and as the leader said, everything's back there on YouTube, he said to me, it's not just play areas, it's council spaces that it's levied on too, and started trying to justify the charge for Buckshaw Village, the fact that this council spent developer funds building a community centre there. But when I look at the guidance on our website to residents, that's not what it says at all. So I think all members probably could do with some clarification on how these are levied, how these are spent, that these aren't recharged. But it may be a member learning session for all members to actually attend as well, given the fact that nobody can explain that to us here. But the other area I wanted to talk to was, I think it's in Appendix 9F, it's page 129. And right at the bottom, I note the really interesting juxtaposition between how a significant part of the Market Walk extension was funded, utilising £4.5 million of developer contributions from Buckshaw Village, And the following paragraph, which talks to how funding options are being explored to deliver a parking solution at Buckshaw Parkway. Now, given that, I mean, unfortunately, Councillor Lynch isn't here too, but, you know, we've all heard him regularly quote, Market Walk makes £1 million a year, a month, a week, depending how close we are to the election cycle, I think. So, you know, I wonder if the leader could confirm for myself, Councillor Turner, Councillor Walker, that recognising these significant sums that have been spent from developer contributions in Buckshaw Village elsewhere, and I'm not doing town centre to not town centre, I'm just saying across the borough, that by the time we get to a position where a parking solution needs funding, which is a much longer standing request than any investment in Market Walk took place, that can he give us assurance this council will find that funding?
Which paragraph are you referring to, Councillor Rigger?
Sorry, it's bottom of page 129. I don't think it's paragraph. The appendix says either 9F or F3. Below a table with a red total on, if that helps you trying to locate it in the printout.
As it's, Councillor Rigger, as it states in the paragraph below the table, where it says that the 696,000 is what's left of the developer's contribution towards the Buckshaw railway station. As you're aware, it's not the parking solution that we're interested in, it is the railway station that we're interested in, which is what we really want. It's the railway station entry points and the parking and everything else that goes with it. Network Rail are still failing to engage with us on it, despite representation from the MP and from county councillors, I remember correctly, under Councillor Ridden. They've failed to do that, and therefore for us to try to solve part of the problem and spend that money on part of the problem would seem a bit ridiculous, particularly when a lot of it's their responsibility. I'm happy to redo that again and to get the new administration at County Hall to try and support that, but we have signally failed to get anywhere at all with Network Rail, is my understanding of the situation.
If I could just respond, I'm not sure who's responsible for making the grant applications, but I believe this council made a grant application to the previous Conservative council, and then now it sits under my portfolio, asking for grant funding to help seek a solution for that. So I believe it's probably, I do agree that Northern are perhaps not fully engaged, but I wouldn't seek to position it that neither council is interested or not working together on this, because we both know those conversations are already underway, so I'd like members to be aware of that. But I did notice, Mr Mayor, that it didn't answer my question.
As I said, Councillor Rigger, with the support of the County Council under the previous administration, I haven't raised it with a new member since last May, but I'm sure I can.
Right. Was it Councillor Boardman?
Was it me? On the budget. Since 2015, when I joined the council, I've had the pleasure of looking at these budgets, Alistair, and it's a shame Peter's not here. And I went back to 2015. Well, actually, I went back to your glory days, as you quote it, of 2016-17, the £17 million income. I'm going to call it the glory days. So I really like that. And since the glory days of 16-17, we have reported a deficit against budget, which strikes me as a bit odd, because when you take your high spot, your highest income for that year, and then you report a deficit year on year after that, there needs to be some kind of levelling up or equalisation somewhere on the line, or else we'll be here in 2030 reporting a deficit against budget of 2016-17. I note some of the significant achievements in 2016-17, and look at the budget. And I printed it off because I was a young councillor then, I couldn't remember it. But £4.45 million of new homes bonus came in during 16-17, a huge amount of money. Some of that was, most of that was allocated. Again, the year after, 4.7 and then 4.6 year on year, new homes bonuses. At a time when the council was delivering considerable amount of homes during that period of time. New homes bonus was never going to last forever, Councillor Bradley, as we know, and will and has been replaced. Your graph on one of the pages, and unfortunately my iPad's just turned off, which is a bit unfortunate, shows what I would call a levelling up. I'm just going to go to this table here. Thank you, Deborah. That's really good of you. It's page 71. Page 71 shows the table, and yes, the glory days of just under £18 million. But if you look at the new homes bonus reducing, you'll see that the retained business rates increases. And then when you see that the caps that go on top during 21 and 22, which is the lower tier service grant allocation and the revenue and the where is the other one? Revenue support grant. Again, topping it back up again. What I'm really struggling with is we don't put any allocation at all in 2023, 23-24 to 24-25. We know we always look at worst case scenarios, but there has to be some middle ground here. It shows a very negative picture, and I accept that the government are working on short-term fixes, Alistair, sorry, Councillor Bradley, to you, Mr Mayor. Short-term fixes while they're coming out of the back of the COVID pandemic. I, like you, would hope that they sort something out, at least we get a 3 to 5 year deal coming forward. But if I was putting that table together and I wasn't being as pessimistic, I might be a little bit more optimistic and put at least 50% of those values in there. It's only an ask, really, that next year, if I'm still stood here and as a councillor, I'd really like to see not a deficit against the 2016-17 budget, which, as I'm saying, is the glory days, but a levelling up across the board between 16-17 and where we are now. Just an ask, Alistair. Thank you.
Councillor Bradley, then Councillor
Noted, but no, that's the numbers that we get from the government. You can take your own view and draw your graph and how you want to do it, but no, that's the numbers that the officers have produced. It's not a political graph, it's a statement of fact. Understand the points you're making, because every year we're told it's going to change and there'll be a new funding settlement and it'll all be sorted out, and it's not. Very similar to special expenses, yeah, because it's all part of the same problem to me. This is all stuff that's been done at different times, and I appreciate that you might think special expenses are specific to this council, but they're not. Many other councils have special expenses the same. And the special expenses have been created at a point in time for a specific area. A lot of this stuff needs sorting out and putting properly into a system. We've been told by the government, and it's this government for the last 7, 8 years now, that this will be sorted out, as would other arrangements, and they haven't been. So we are in the situation that we're in, and we can have that debate another night, but in principle, we're not changing reports on the behest of political parties.
Right. Councillor Clifford, and then Councillor Gabbett.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I thought I'd better speak, actually. Obviously, I'd like to thank the leader, the deputy leader in his absence, all the officers and everyone else who's contributed to what is a fantastic Labour budget. Starting to hear some negativity now from the opposition, but this is an amazing budget. I mean, you know what I'm going to say, that increase of £240,000 back into the Green Agenda budget, this is what we can do. It's absolutely fantastic, helps us achieve our goals to go carbon neutral by 2030. I thought I'd better get that out there because it is a very, very important thing. But it also, this budget has an awful lot of things in for everyone. And one of the things that's very important to me and to my residents is the new super surgery in Whitley Woods. Now, I'd like to remind the opposition, budget 2019, the Conservatives didn't support it. Now, that's important. The residents need to know that. We are proud on this side of what we're doing. We brought the super surgery to actually Clanley Woods. It is now in Clayton West and Cewden. It is over the border in Clanley Woods. Very proud of this budget that we have. It's a fantastic Labour budget, and I will presume everybody tonight will vote for it. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Gabbett's decided he doesn't wish to speak, so is there anyone else wish to speak before we go? Councillor Khan. Stand up.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I fully welcome the new projects we're investing in, as they greatly help towards tackling health inequalities and improving quality of life around the borough, not just for the ageing population, but also for our future generations.
Else? Right, someone's asked that we move to the vote, so we will do just that. Can we remind us of what we're actually voting on, please, Chief Executive? This is the Labour substantive.
Yeah, so this is the substantive motion, the original, the administration's budget.
Because you're deputy.
Everybody clear? Yeah. Okay, right. Councillor Berry, you're under pressure, Julie, because you're first. Councillor Berry.
Four.
Councillor Ainsworth. Councillor Beaver. Councillor Boardman. Councillor Bradley. Councillor Chapman. Councillor Clifford. Councillor Alan Cullens. Councillor Magda Cullens. Councillor Dalton. Councillor Derbyshire. Not here. Councillor France. Gordon France. Councillor Margaret France. Councillor Gabbett. Councillor G. Councillor Gray. Councillor Heaton. Councillor Howarth. Councillor Idden. Councillor Hasina Kaur. Councillor Samir Khan. Councillor Zora Khan. Councillor Lowe. Councillor Molyneux. Councillor Morwood. Councillor Murray. Councillor Nevitt. Councillor Alan Platt. Councillor Deborah Platt. Councillor Riggett. Councillor Sherwood. Councillor Snape. Councillor Simans. Councillor Turner. Councillor Walker. Councillor Whiffin. Councillor Whittaker. The Mayor. You want to vote? Councillor Holgate.
Just in case we don't quite get over the line, you know. Right.
So it's carried.
It's carried by 24 votes to 13. We now move on to the perestroika bit of the meeting. And if we could bring up the new notice of motion. Is that correct? Is that what we're doing? Is that how we're doing it?
Yeah.
Right. Go, Councillor Gordon.
I would like to propose a notice of motion to seek assurances through a vote. The following statement be approved. To commit to the funding proposals in the Conservative Group Amendment in paragraphs 2, 3 and 4 for a period of 3 years subject to successful uptake and implementation to be funded from general reserves.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to second that. Notice of motion, yeah. Thank you.
Right, okay.
Just go to the vote.
We can go straight to the vote because I believe this has been agreed outside. It's outside of the budget and therefore we don't need a recorded and named vote. So all those in favour, please indicate.
Carried.
Anyone against? Voila, there you go. Thank you, that's agreed.
No.
Are we
No, we're not finished yet.
No, we're not finished. Item 10, exclusion of press and public. Councillor Bradley.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Can I propose that we exclude the public and press? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
All those in favour, Steve, you need a vote.
All those in favour of removing press and public? We'll just take a minute or two for the press to leave.